I'm not even gonna waste your time here, so I'm gonna go just straight up. I want to talk about Project Sentry, or as you guys know, it's Stranger Than Heaven, which was revealed a few days ago in Summer's Games Fest, or was it last night? I don't even fucking know anymore. This motherfucker right here, this main character is immortal. That's it. That's my theory. Now you might be saying, yo, but that's crazy though. I actually got quite a lot of damning evidence to prove that why I believe the main character is immortal. So let's go over it. Alright, so first thing I want to talk about specifically is the thumbnails for both trailers of the game. So the thumbnail for both the first and second trailer of the game, if you guys take a look, the main character has glowing blue eyes. Now you guys might just think this is absolutely has zero relevance that he has glowing blue eyes. It's just for effect, maybe to show that the main character is American, considering he was speaking English at the end of the second trailer. But I do think it's a bit more than that. If you take a look at both pictures, first of all, you'll realize that both of these characters look totally different. And they have the same necklace though, and they have the same eye colors, so they are the same person, at least in essence. But they do look very different, like person-wise. If you look at their facial structure or just how they look, they don't look like the same person. And in the second trailer, you can tell that the main character is probably an American and not a Japanese person. But in the first trailer, can you really say that? In the first trailer, he does look like a Japanese person. So it's possible that they're two totally different people. Or at least, what my theory is, they're two different bodies. Now let me get there. Let me cook. Now if you've ever watched Doctor Who, you'll know exactly what I'm about to talk about. In Doctor Who, there's this thing called regeneration. This is how this show has been running for ages, since the black and white times of TV. But Doctor Who, when the Doctor himself dies, he regenerates into a new body and a new actor takes over, but it's still the same character at heart. It just continues off a new actor, and the personality maybe changes a bit. But my idea is that this main character here is not that different from the Doctor within Doctor Who. Every time this guy dies, he regenerates. Now you might say, where the fuck did you pull that from? That is so random. But I do have a few things, or like a few, I guess, ideas on why I think that's the case. So my first reason is, and I've said this before, is that in both thumbnails, the two different guys, well, they look different. We don't know if they're different, but they just look different. That's just my first point. And you might say, oh, but that's not enough. Well, let me get a bit more into it. So for my second point, I'd like to thank someone on Twitter for actually spotting this. I'll leave a link to their tweet in the description. But within one of the frames within the trailer, it shows three different dates: 1915, 1929, and 1943. Now, why are these dates important? And I'm about to tell you why. If you remember the very first trailer for Project Sentry, so this was before the game was even titled Stranger Than Heaven. Back when it was titled just by its codename, Project Sentry, the first trailer took place in the year 1915. This second trailer, however, takes place 28 years later, within 1943 in Japan. So why such a big difference in time? And here's the thing, if you take a look at this frame, it shows two of those dates, 1915 and 1943. But there's one date that's missing, 1929. We haven't seen this date yet in any gameplay footage or any trailers and so on. And why is that? Well, if you do a little bit of simple math, you'll figure out that all three of these years have 14 years in between each other. You see what I'm saying? So this isn't just some regular time skip. All the time skips have specifically 14 years in between them. But why? My theory is that every time the main character dies, just like Doctor Who, he regenerates into a new body. And then when he regenerates, he basically regenerates 14 years in the future. So when he dies, he comes back 14 years later in a new body, and his story continues. My idea is that RGG is trying to write a story that's going to take us through the entire 20th century of Japan, starting from 1915 all the way to 2000 something. And they're going to do this by telling the story where the main character is immortal, and every time he dies, he goes 14 years into the future. But in order for me to prove this, I have to prove that the game is going to go through the full century as a whole. And how can I do that? Well, first of all, if we take a look at the name of the code name of this game, it's called Project Sentry. That's my first biggest piece of evidence, I guess, backing up my claim. Second of all, I do believe this game has something to do with reincarnation, or at least being rebirthed after dying. because the game is titled Stranger Than Heaven. What can be stranger than an afterlife? Coming back to the world 14 years later. Don't you think that's stranger than just going to the afterlife? On the final frames of the second trailer, you'll see that they reveal the logo, but instead of just revealing the title of the game, they reveal the title in a multitude of different logos and different art styles. Now, if you looked at these pictures like me, you might have thought, hey, all of these kinda look like movie logos. But what's the more interesting part? It's like all these movie logos reflect a certain time period of a movie being made. For example, this one here gives you 80s vibes, doesn't it? Furthermore, if you take a look at this specific logo here, there's one phrase that says, "Life never stops." How can life never stop? You gotta die eventually, right? So what if the main character is just immortal? So to summarize my findings, basically what I believe is Project Sentry is a game about an immortal character who's probably not Japanese, he might be American, but he is in Japan and he might be cursed with something that is stranger than heaven. This curse that I believe is that instead of him going to the afterlife when he dies, instead he goes 14 years within the future, eventually living through the entire 20th century of Japan. This is just what I think. I think the blue eyes that are glowing signifies that he has some sort of supernatural power, other than the fact that, well, the blue eyes might just be there to represent he's American and he's not Japanese, because Japanese people ethnically just don't have blue eyes. That's just how I think that maybe the glowing blue eyes signify that he has some sort of magical power. This magical power being that he reincarnates every time he's born, or sorry, every time he dies, my bad. And my proof for this mainly comes from the fact that he looks different, and also because of the huge time skips that are within the game. Not to mention, the game itself is called Project Sentry. Wouldn't it be weird to call it Project Sentry if the game doesn't even last 50 years, like within the time frame? Originally, I thought the game was called Project Sentry because the game took place 100 years, at least 100 years before modern day. But it's not that. Clearly, considering that we have 3 different time periods that were shown within one of the trailers. And they all have specifically 14 years between them. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. Maybe I'm just schizophrenic.